Hey folks, this is Riker, and Path of Exile 2 revealed all the details of their massive update coming next week. Also, the Blizzard veterans that formed Dreamhaven revealed an entire lineup of upcoming games, and we even have some StarCraft news this week. We'll dive into all this and more. As always, timestamps are in the description below if you'd like to jump ahead to different sections, but first be sure to have rung that sub-notification bell to be alerted to new Saturday morning episodes. We'll get things started with the juicy Path of Exile 2 news of the week. GGG dropped their massive Dawn of the Hunt content reveal, and it is stacked. They're introducing the brand new class, the Huntress, which is a dexterous hybrid melee ranged class with lots of synergies designed to encourage swapping between melee and spear throwing, and it has the deepest combo chains of any class so far. The Huntress generates hurricanes and melee and can toss out twisters at range, and these effects can interact with ground effects, like if they go over a fire effect on the ground, whether you made that fire effect or whether it was an enemy that spawned it, then your storm effect will take on that element. It's really cool. The Huntress also uses bucklers to parry, a new mechanic that I initially thought would mean I would never play a Huntress, because I fail to parry in pretty much any game that has parrying. But during the Q&A, Jonathan clarified that it's not really a skill-based parrying like in other games. You don't have to perfectly time your parry. Basically, you hold the button, and if an enemy hits you while you have it up, then your parry goes off. But there is the opportunity cost of just holding the parry button and not, actually doing stuff like attacking. Plus, you can get stunned out of a parry if you're just kind of holding down the parry all the time. We're also getting a new skill that lets you summon a Roa, either as a companion, or you can ride the Roa like a mount in combat. Mounted combat's a very cool fantasy that we don't really get to experience elsewhere. D4 has mounts, but you don't really get mounted combat, you just get your dismount power. On top of that, we're looking at 5 new Ascendancy classes coming. We see powers here that let you grow blood boils on enemy skin, which burst and spread corrupted blood around. We see the ability to equip a 3rd ring. We see basically a budget headhunter power that lets you steal an enemy's modifiers temporarily. The Smith of Kitava Ascendancy for Warrior that we speculated on last week from the data mine, well, that was confirmed to be true. You can imbue your weapon with fire, you can summon an animated copy of your weapon to fight alongside you, kind of a spiritual weapon from D&D kind of thing. You can enhance your armor. In fact, if you wear a plain normal armor piece, then in your Ascendancy, you can actually build up your own armor affixes of your choice for total control here. Then we got the Lich Ascendancy for Witches. That allows you to trade life for energy shield. We got the Tactician for Mercenaries. He's basically a co-op player's dream with buffs for the whole team. We had speculated that it would be a minion ascendancy where you have actual soldiers as your minions, but that turned out to not be the case. He does, however, get a rain of arrows skill, and it's said to be fired from off-screen archer minions, so I guess there's that. The update includes 25 new skills, over 100 new support gems, over 100 new unique items. The new skills include Raise Spectre for minion players. That lets you summon the soul of pretty much any monster that you've defeated in the game, almost. And for the new unique items, there's a big focus on ensuring these items have mid-game and end-game tier versions of them. And the ultimate goal with these items is to have a unique item for every base item type in the game. We're also going all in on endgame improvements, new maps, more varied encounters, reduced busy work. Also, they're adding these rogue exiles who are essentially AI players. You battle for the loot they have equipped, which is a super cool way to get unique items. There's also a big focus on ensuring more and better crafting tools. Runes will now come in higher tiers to remain relevant at higher levels, though without a dedicated stash tab. I'm concerned about the stash bloat that these are gonna at least temporarily introduce. I'm sure we're gonna eventually get a stash tab. The question is, how long? They're adding a new mechanic called wisps. There are multiple different kinds of wisps. It's this thing you're going to encounter in a map, and you'll be able to follow it. It's going to sort of meander around, and as it passes through enemies, it's going to infuse those enemies until it ultimately possesses a rare monster. And then all these infused monsters can drop new crafting items for specific item slots based on which kind of wisp it is. You can also modify wisps via tablets in the Atlas as well as in the endgame Atlas tree. Also, greater essences will be much easier to get, and the devs said that they would also like to add a new crafting mechanic pretty much every league. GGG also acknowledged that the endgame needed some serious TLC. They said they need to add a lot more content there, and they want to increase the number of interesting and different encounters that can happen in maps. They also want to smoothen out the progression throughout maps and reduce the amount of busy work that players have to do via towers. So we're getting new maps. Each new map comes with new encounters. For instance, there's this one Stonehenge type thing where you have this event that spawns 10 waves of progressively more challenging bosses, which offer special drops only available on that map. They're also bringing in a Lake of Calandra map where you can find broken mirrors at the end, offering new base type amulets and rings. There's 10 new Atlas passives that you can earn by completing new unique maps. Towers are now fewer in number, but way more impactful. We'll only be running about 1/3 as many towers as before. They have a much wider radius to how many maps they're going to impact on the Atlas. They can hold up to 3 tablets at once, and the tablets add twice as many mechanics. There's also going to be more obvious, like, quests to chase in the Atlas now. You're going to have these nexuses that spread corruption, and the corruption in maps will now be very, very obvious as game mechanics while you're running them. Once you clear one of these nexuses, or nexi, then all the corrupted maps in the area become cleansed. And cleansed maps don't just become normal maps, cleansed maps have their own special mechanics and rewards. So basically, you need to make a decision on whether you want to first complete all the corrupted maps while they are corrupted before you do the nexus, or you just want to beeline to the nexus and then clear the maps in their cleansed version. And it really depends on what kind of reward you're chasing. Waystone's got some quality of life updates as well. It's going to be easier to sustain Waystones. Waystone's maps, kind of use them interchangeably from PoE1. But basically, if you can handle a certain difficulty of Waystone, then you should never run out of Waystones for that difficulty. They also acknowledged something that I thought was super significant, which I've spoken about before. The campaign is this one experience that teaches you that it's okay to die again. But then the endgame is super punishing, telling you that no amount of death is acceptable. Well, now they're making a smoother transition. When you start mapping, you can die 6 times before you fail the map. And the number of deaths before failure drops with more juiced or higher tier maps. Reddit user Asprof made this really useful image that shows what this is going to look like. Great change here. Then as a new crafting mechanic in PoE2, they're bringing in the Recombinator, changed somewhat from PoE1, but basically it lets you merge 2 items together and it unlocks after you complete your first expedition. Basically from these 2 items, you pick mods from them that you desire, then you mash the items together and you pray to RNGesus that your items survive and become something that you wanted. The more mods that you pick, the less your odds of success, and if you fail, both items are destroyed. Oh, also, omens will be 2.5 times more common now, and every ritual window will have at least 1 omen. Now, one really great thing about this update is that all of the content will be coming to existing characters as well. It's not going to be just in the new league, so you do not have to start a new character to experience all these changes. And I think this may actually help bring back a lot of players who may have been waiting for a more substantial update to restart the campaign, maybe waiting for more of the campaign before playing through it again. So I think this is a really smart move of them. That said, in the Q&A, they really encouraged starting a new character, especially in the new league. A lot has changed with regards to progression. So the campaign, everything, it's going to feel very different now. And you're not going to get to experience that if you just jump straight back into your, level 80 or whatever character. Jonathan Rogers went so far as to say that there's almost no point in them listening to feedback from people who are not doing the new league, since so much has changed with the balance. Now, outside of the presentation itself, Jonathan's been doing the press tours, so we got extra little tidbits from interviews here and there. Speaking to Eurogamer, he said that there is a 65% chance of PoE2 hitting full release this year. He said, quote, "I have a schedule that will get us there. It's a question of, can we actually meet that schedule which will be challenging but not impossible. And if it's not out by December, he said it would be out by March 2026. It sounds like he wants to finish Acts 4 through 6 before the full release, or at least in time for the full release. He definitely wants there to be all new content that drops with the release, and it does sound like classes is going to be something probably saved for release or even after. He said, quote, "It's not like we have a shortage of classes, right? If we didn't have 1 or 2 of them during early access, that wouldn't be the end of the world. We're doing all right. We'll try to get them all in, but if we don't, then whatever, it is what it is." Speaking of Eurogamer, Jonathan opened up about the early access launch and how its unexpected success derailed their plans. Quote, "We immediately ran into the situation we would normally expect in the full released game, which is a bunch of players are like, oh, you're breaking my build, by nerfing things. So we had to realize, okay, we have to treat this like it's a released game in this regard and be a bit more careful. Whenever you've got players, it derails what your plans are, and it has to. It's good that it does because it forces you immediately to be responding to what the game needs, which now becomes very obvious because you've got actual players playing it. He's also confident that the game will get much more popular when it launches out of early access, partially because it'll be free and therefore opened up to everyone. He said, quote, "I'd be incredibly disappointed if we weren't cracking 1 million concurrent players for the full release. And honestly, I think we could do better than that." Then in an interview with PC Gamer, he gave some thoughts on the competition. Quote, "There is room for quite a lot of different players in the genre. It doesn't have to be that you just got one game that dominates all the others. I'm perfectly fine with the idea of there being ARPGs from plenty of other people. So long as people are willing to come back and play our game for a month 4 times a year, then I'm good. We also learned that there will be another Path of Exile 1 season between Dawn of the Hunt and the next Path of Exile 2 season, so don't worry PoE1 players, they won't be putting off the new league for too much longer." So yeah, huge update coming next Friday as a reminder. But tell me folks, what is your favorite part of this update? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Moving on to some Diablo 4 news. Well, things have been kind of quiet as we wait for either patch notes or a campfire chat going over learnings from the PTR and what changes to expect going into Season 8. In the meantime, excitement for Season 8 is mixed as people are still waiting to find out what the final state of balance of everything is going to be, whether it's going to be to their liking. Some people found the boss powers way too strong, kind of dominating the meta. Some found progression too slow now, a big contrast to Season 7. I've also seen some discussions about the seasonal mechanics that vanish once the season ends. And while I have never really been opposed to these kind of temporary powers, the whole borrowed power thing, and I actually do see the benefit in the devs being able to design things without concern for their long-term impact on the game, with regards to power creep, for instance. I did see a counter-argument that I'd never really considered before. A bunch of dev time is being spent on content that is effectively disposable. It's going to be discarded. And that time could instead have been spent on adding permanent content into the game. So take Path of Exile, for instance. It's a game that has a huge amount of content built up over 10 years because all of their seasonal content is always designed with the idea that it will be permanent content. And then if it's not received well, then they decide to not make it permanent. Whereas with Diablo 4, they kind of take the opposite approach, where the content is designed to be impermanent. And if it's received very well, then they'll try to find a way to work it into the base game. But that can take, months or seasons before we even see it appear in some kind of a form. We definitely have seen season themes have positive impacts on the game further down the line, lessons learned, improvements to existing systems and all that. But that still means a ton of the content, the work, the time, the effort that is just discarded from every season. And I never really thought of things that way, that, yeah, like the season content is designed to be disposable. And, when you think about it, there's only a finite amount of development resources, and if I have to pick between those resources giving us features that we get to enjoy forever versus features we get to enjoy just for one season, well, the choice starts to become kind of obvious. That's why a lot of the best seasons, or at least the best received seasons overall, not necessarily season theme, But the seasons that people enjoyed the most seem to be the ones that introduced permanent big changes, like Loot Reborn or the Infernal Hordes, right? Loot Reborn was Season 4, Infernal Horde Season 5. The latter bosses, those were a well-received addition to the game. I don't know if that was Season 2 or... I guess it must have been Season 2. All these things that basically weren't really a season theme. And that's, I think, part of why Season 2 was considered so much fun, and why the more recent seasons that just kind of feel like rehashes of Season 2 don't feel as novel or exciting, because we basically got a new feature added to the game a while ago. Seasonal powers. That's the feature. Every season we get some kind of rotating power. That is one feature. It's not a different feature every season. We just expect to get some form of tacked on power that sticks around for one season and goes away. So any seasonal powers at this point don't feel like something new. It's just, the current season's manifestation of an existing feature. Similarly with the seasonal activity. So the game doesn't feel like it's becoming bigger or deeper because there's a revolving door of content with the season themes. But what do you folks think? Should the devs focus more on permanent content, or do you like the current approach? Sound off in the comments. And speaking of seasons, I saw a neat idea from Redditor Chimney Imp, who suggested that seasons should end with increasing waves of enemies spawning until all players die. I don't know about that specific implementation, but I do like the idea of making the end of the season some kind of an actual event that people would want to log in for. Imagine monsters spilling into towns, overrunning the world. Imagine world bosses stomping around cities. Whatever the case. Imagine something happening that puts an end cap to the season that makes people want to log in for, a few minutes, an hour, whatever it is. Maybe you can even tie some kind of reward behind it or something. But what kind of season end event ideas do you folks have? Moving on to some Assassin's Creed news, the latest entry, Assassin's Creed Shadows, surpassed 2 million players within just a couple days of release. That makes it the second biggest launch in franchise history, even topping Origins and Odyssey. On Steam, though, it only peaked at 64,000 concurrent players, but Odyssey peaked at 62,000, so I just think Steam isn't a major platform for Assassin's Creed games. Not surprising, given only 27% of players were on PC for Assassin's Creed Shadows, and I hear you can get it even cheaper via Ubisoft Connect than on Steam, so why get it on Steam, apart from not having to go through Ubisoft stuff, I guess. Now, I've read a lot of comments from players who've actually, put a good 20 hours into the game, and there's a lot of love for the game. I see praise for its combat, for its improved stealth mechanics, as well as the dual protagonist system. Overall, I get the impression that the game is a solid 8 out of 10. Basically, if you like Assassin's Creed games, you'll love this. If you don't, this game won't change your mind. Now, you've probably heard about some controversy around the game, and now that the chips are falling, the cookies are crumbling, whatever the case is, the game is out and things are becoming clear. It's seeming like some of this controversy is just kind of manufactured. We were hearing stuff about, this game is disrespecting Japanese culture, and there's a big outrage in Japan about it. And yeah, it was true that some people were upset that you could destroy Japanese temples in the game. Ubisoft patched that out, though, on day one to make sure that sacred items were indestructible. And beyond that, you don't really see any actual real outrage, just people misinterpreting things that are, those like the Japanese prime minister who was saying some things, and it turns out he was really just talking about real-world vandalism of a sacred object that might be encouraged, that a lot of foreign tourists will come and partake in because they don't understand the culture and they don't have that respect. But if you look at actual reviews from reviewers from Japan, they seem to like the game. At the end of the day, it's no secret that a lot of people wanted to see this game fail, because this game failing would basically be a nail in the coffin for Ubisoft. But it does look like this game will be a commercial success for Ubisoft. Along those lines, though, Ubisoft did end up selling a bit more of themselves to Tencent. Ubisoft created a new subsidiary based on its tentpole franchises, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, and Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six, and Tencent invested $1.25 billion into it to own a 25% stake in this subsidiary. Now, prior to this, Tencent owned 10% of Ubisoft in total, and it's unclear now with that 25% of the what ought to be a pretty significant subsidiary, what that now brings their overall total percentage of Ubisoft to. If I had to guess, it could be up to 20%, maybe as low as 15. Now, on to some exciting news about Dreamhaven, where Blizzard veterans are cooking up some pretty intriguing games. The studio, founded by former Blizzard CEO Mike Morhaime, just revealed fresh details on their upcoming releases. First up, we got Sunderfolk launching on April 23rd. It's a unique spin on co-op RPGs, combining the feel of tabletop board games with the convenience of smartphones. Players share a single screen, but control their characters through their phones, letting each person get personalized info without slowing down the group's fun. And if you're intrigued and want to give it a try, a demo is already available on GeForce Now until April 7th. But if you prefer something a bit more intense, there's Wildgate. This seems to be their flagship title. It's Dreamhaven's ambitious multiplayer shooter arriving sometime this year. And this is not your typical shooter. Wildgate features chaotic matches between 5 teams of 4 players, all competing in procedurally generated space maps to grab an artifact or just blow up everyone else's spaceships. Gameplay is packed with choices to make. Do you want to stealthily sneak around enemy ships? Do you want to focus on ship-to-ship combat? Do you want to rush directly towards the artifact? It's part shooter, part strategy, part chaotic space heist. Playtests are kicking off April 10th, and signups are open now if you want to jump into the action early. Dreamhaven's also been busy publishing some promising indie titles. Linked Banner of the Spark is coming out of early access on May 22nd. It combines roguelite action with relaxing activities like farming and town building. And so far, players are loving it on Steam, giving it very positive reviews. Dreamhaven also just picked up the publishing rights for Mechabellum, a gritty auto-battler that's already made waves in early access. If you're curious, it's having a free-to-play weekend on Steam from April 4th through the 8th. Dreamhaven's coming out of the gate swinging. They've been quiet for a long time. We heard a little bit here and there, but now these big reveals. But what are you folks most interested in that they have revealed? I think Wildgate has the potential, the biggest potential, to become a viral game. Then in some Valve news, Monica Harrington, a former Valve executive, in a recent interview with PC Gamer, spilled some behind-the-scenes secrets from the late 90s, back when Valve actually struggled to sell copies of Half-Life. Kind of hard to imagine, but apparently the game's initial sales were sluggish until Harrington came up with one genius marketing move: slapping a Game of the Year sticker on the box. Simple, effective, and at the time, actually pretty innovative. It worked so well that it basically started the trend we see everywhere. Everyone saying their game is Game of the Year. Feels pretty disingenuous these days. Anyone can call a Game of the Year. Any random outlet, any random person down the street can say, hey, this is my Game of the Year, and you can slap that on a box, and it doesn't really mean anything anymore. She also shared a quirky story behind Valve's early DRM decisions. Turns out Harrington's own nephew inspired Valve to develop an authentication system. Basically, he spent a $500 check that she had sent him, intended for school supplies, on a CD-ROM replicator, and he went ahead and made a bunch of copies of games for his friends. So, thanks to her nephew, because he told her about this, put in her head the idea that, oh, people are going to be doing this with our games now. They went ahead and implemented some kind of authentication scheme, at which point their message boards became flooded with gamers saying, hey, your game doesn't work. But perhaps the most fascinating tidbit that we learned was what might have been. Back in the late 90s, apparently Gabe Newell himself considered launching Valve's own social network. And not just for gamers. So imagine an alternate universe where Valve and not Facebook dominated social media. She said it probably would not have looked anything like Facebook, or really anything else that we have today. And man, do I want to live in a world where the Gaben rules social media, not the Zuck. And lastly, in some StarCraft news, no, don't get your hopes up too high, The iconic Blizzard RTS is getting its own official tabletop miniatures game thanks to Polish publisher Archon Studio, coming in 2026. And hey, if this is the only form in which I can get some StarCraft, I will take it, okay? Archon Studio also teased that they'll be releasing a whole series of board games set in the StarCraft universe starting in 2027. They haven't shown us much yet, but we'll be learning a lot more during a live stream on April 3rd. And that's going to wrap up this week's video, folks, but do be sure to check out last week's video in which we discuss why the drama between Path of Exile 2 and Last Epoch is actually important to gamers. Thanks for watching. Special thanks to my Patreon supporters for making these videos possible. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to join Riker's Raiders for more gaming content.